Hello and welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel if you're a returning subscriber. October is now upon us and I could not be more thrilled at this prospect because I had actually decorated my house on Labor Day in preparation for Halloween because, well, Halloween just doesn't last long enough for my personal taste and I will take all of the horror that I can get. And today let's go ahead and look at 10 different games that are coming down the pike for the month of October. Now, not every game on this list is spooky, so if you're not a huge horror fan, there are still some interesting non-terrifying titles dropping next month. But for now, let's go ahead and kick it off with a remake of a spooky cult classic, as Until Dawn Remake drops on October 4th. And I'm pretty excited for this one, as I haven't played Until Dawn for years at this point, and games like The Quarry and, well, more recently, the casting of Frank Stone, which I talked about the other day, keep my love for this genre high. If you missed it the first time around, this is sure to be a great way to experience the story for the first time. And while this would personally be on my playlist for winter horror games, given its snowy, isolated lodge setting, I'm still more than happy to play it this Halloween. Particularly with its Unreal Engine 5 overhaul, camera improvements, and reauthored audio, which is very likely to make this the definitive way to experience Until Dawn, that is assuming you haven't already had the pleasure. So if Frank Stone left you hungry for more, this should definitely satisfy, and it's one that I'll certainly be keeping an eye on as we race towards Halloween. Moving on to more lighthearted fare, at least temporarily, we have the SpongeBob SquarePants The Patrick Star game also dropping on October 4th. Now personally, I never got really into SpongeBob since that was a little bit after my time, I guess, but anytime I've had occasion to interact with that property, it's always been a fun time. In this one, you'll be running around as Patrick, obviously, engaging in bouts of physics-based mayhem in the open world of Bikini Bottom. Also, this is an extension of SpongeBob 25, which is a worldwide campaign celebrating the 25th anniversary of SpongeBob. Covering a day in Patrick's life, you'll be using various items to explore your environment, interact with other fan-favorite characters, and completing quests along the way. I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun for fans of the series, and almost certainly a nice reprieve from spookier titles dropping in the lead up to Halloween. Next up, we have another remake, and probably the remake that's dropping in the month of October, and speaking personally, this is my most anticipated game of the year, and that would be Silent Hill 2 Remake. This also comes out on October 6th if you opt for the deluxe for early access, as I certainly will be, or you can grab it on October 8th if you're waiting for the standard release. And I've made absolutely zero secret of my love for Silent Hill over the years. I was there for the original release of Silent Hill 2 way back in 2001, and have remained unceasingly obsessed with it decades later. And while there was some initial apprehension from fans with Blooper handling the remake, and Konami rushing out an ill-advised combat trailer early on that wasn't quite polished enough, the tide is definitely turning in favor of this being a stellar remake. Thus far, there have been at least 2 extended live streams of the game from Japan and Germany that were, I believe, sanctioned by Konami, so at the very least they have a lot of confidence in their product, which is definitely encouraging. If you're new to this game, the setup is that you play as James Sunderland, who comes to the town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his dead wife, Mary. And what follows is a true masterpiece of horror that, in my eyes, is like the video game equivalent of The Shining, which is to say a truly essential work in the medium. So here's hoping it does well, because Silent Hill 1 and 3 are probably in greater need of a remake than 2, but we'll see when it gets rolled out to the masses fully on October 8th. Next up, from Atlus, we have their curious new open-world RPG, Metaphor ReFantazio, which I think I'm pronouncing correctly, and that is coming on October 11th. And I'm very curious about this one for a few reasons. For starters, Atlus already has an incredible track record with these types of RPGs, and they are one of the few outfits that consistently puts out high-quality games. This is being done by Studio Zero, a division within Atlus that is focused on new IPs that are distinct from their more recognizable Persona series. Taking place in a medieval fantasy world that is a mirror of our real world, you'll be following a non-silent protagonist who's on a journey to protect his kingdom while forging bonds of friendship along the way and overcoming a variety of obstacles. I'm positive there will be a lot of familiar concepts and gameplay for fans of SMT and Persona, but I think what has me most excited for this one is the traveling portions of the game, whereby you'll be manning a gigantic crawling vehicle of sorts called the Gauntlet Runner. I love games that just let me sort of chill out with my buds, so I'm really looking forward to this aspect of the game. I may not pick this one up immediately just because I know Atlus will eventually release an expanded version of it at some point, but we'll see if hype gets the better of me when it drops on October 11th. Next up, let's look at a quieter, more straightforward indie platformer from the creative minds that brought us Grease back in 2018, and that would be Neva, releasing on October 15th. Neva follows a young woman and her lifelong bond with her wolf as they journey through a decaying world. The visuals have a similar, dreamy, kind of painterly aesthetic, and this looks like it might end up being a perfect cozy game to curl up with this fall. Provided the platforming mechanics can match the artistry on display, I think this has some real potential, and I have to say I'm tempted to dive in day one on this one, if for no other reason than just to see the beauty of each new environment. If the trailers are any indication, it's certainly shaping up to be a vivid experience if nothing else, but we'll know more once reviewers start weighing in after the drop on the 15th. Moving on, next up we have a game that I am cautiously optimistic about as a horror fan, mostly because I enjoyed all 3 of the films in its world so far, and that would be A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead, launching on October 17th. Set on day 105 of the invasion, this means The Road Ahead is happening well into the proliferation of A Quiet Place's Death Angels after they've arrived via meteorite. You'll be playing as survivor Alex Taylor, an asthmatic college student who, along with her boyfriend Martin, must avoid and survive these hostile alien creatures. Speaking of, obviously the Death Angels track their prey predominantly through sound, and The Road Ahead will likely lean on this heavily as you navigate environments carefully to avoid any danger. Although some trailers have definitely showcased some action, so this might not be an Alien Isolation sort of experience where all confrontation is hopeless, but we'll see what happens. And again, I am cautiously optimistic about this one. Normally budget price titles are kind of a red flag for me, but then again I have enjoyed games that don't launch at full-blown AAA title prices, so here's hoping it delivers a good experience for fans and newcomers alike that are just looking to get their survival horror kicks against a new foe when it releases on the 17th. Speaking of movie tie-ins, this next one is much lighter, and considering I personally love the movie, I'm really hoping this one does well, and that would be TMNT Unleashed, hitting storefronts the next day on October 18th. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this is going to be a platforming beat-em-up, albeit one that is in 3D rather than what you might be expecting from the arcade classics or the excellent Shredder's Revenge. Taking place shortly after the events of the film, the Turtles have now been accepted into society and are actively attending high school. Unfortunately, their academics get interrupted as they have to deal with a new wave of mutants wreaking havoc across New York City. I'm expecting this will provide some pretty straightforward beat-em-up action, although there are a couple of things that really stand out to me here. The first is the emphasis on traversal, which could be a whole lot of fun if they can nail this part of the movement, and secondarily, I just really love the visual style, which looks to perfectly mirror the reduced frame rate comic book look of the film. So if you're a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan, it'll probably be a fun little romp at the very least. And while this may not be the 2D action games that we're used to, this next one is a bit of a curiosity in that it definitely nails the 16-bit 2D look, and that would be Retrorealms, Halloween, and Ash vs. Evil Dead, also releasing on October 18th. And I'll be honest, I'm not really sure how to feel about this one just yet, but I do know how I feel about Halloween and Evil Dead in that I absolutely love them, so I at least had to check in on this oddity of a 16-bit throwback. And I'm a little bit hesitant because on the surface this does look a little suspicious, and that's mostly thanks to its description where it bills itself as connecting select Retrorealms games with other titles in the series, mentioning that games and DLC are sold separately to unlock new access and abilities to create the ultimate mashup of horror legends. And don't get me wrong, I love the idea of horror legends being smashed together, and that's one of the biggest reasons that I play Dead by Daylight. But Dead by Daylight earned my trust over hundreds of hours, and meanwhile, Retrorealms Arcade is a relatively new offering, and the idea they're putting forth here, combining Michael Myers and Ash Williams, sounds very cool. I'm just hopeful that the gameplay of these retro action platformers lives up to the promises that they're making. Don't get me wrong, I very much trust Way Forward if games like Shantae and The Mummy Remastered taught me anything, but I guess I'll just have to wait and see how they handle this. On the one hand, it looks like a really cool way to add some retro flair to some horror icons, but on the other, that could also devolve into a microtransactional nightmare depending on how the DLC works for this. But for now, I'm withholding judgment until the game drops properly again on October 18th. And speaking of classics from Way Forward, I'm sure a bunch of retro horror fans will be pumped for another classic with Clock Tower Rewind releasing on October 29th. Despite my love for horror, both modern and retro, I've never played a Clock Tower game, so this one isn't really going to mean a ton to me from a nostalgia standpoint. But apparently this is the first time that the original will be translated and made available outside of Japan. In fact, so lax is my knowledge of this series that I didn't even realize that apparently Clock Tower for the PS1 from 1996 is actually Clock Tower 2 in Japan. But hey, now that this original point-and-click adventure is being made available with some modern amenities and improvements, this is one that's definitely on my radar to check out this Halloween. Especially considering it explores a genre that I don't often revisit, and even though I have next to no familiarity with the Clock Tower series, I do still have a fondness for the point-and-click genre as somebody who grew up on old Sierra point-and-click adventures for PC. And finally, I think it's probably safe to call this one a cult classic, or it wouldn't be getting a remaster that releases on Halloween no less, and that would be Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered. And you know, of all the games on this list, this is the one that I'm most ashamed of having not played, and I don't know how I missed this back in the day. Especially given its rogues gallery of contributors as a game developed by Grasshopper, written by Goichi Suda, produced by Shinji Mikami, and composed by Akira Yamaoka. That's a whole lot of top-tier talent, and while critical reviews of the original were hit and miss thanks to some clunkiness amidst the over-the-top schlock it represents, I think this is going to end up being a real treat, and I know at least a few of you have recommended this game, and I'm pretty excited to check it out myself. But hey, that's it for now, and as always, this is not a comprehensive list of every game that's coming out next month. Rather, it's just 10 that I thought looked to be pretty interesting, but hey, what about you? Are there any games that I missed or blatantly should have been included on this list for October? If so, let me know in the comments below, because as always, I'd love to hear your feedback. As far as what's coming up on the channel, I will be doing September pickups next week, and probably something about Silent Hill 2, since I can't stop thinking about it, and just, a whole range of spooky stuff as we draw nearer to All Hallows Eve. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch videos on the channel, it really means a lot to me. Have a tremendous day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.